Welcome as we let our colleagues in. I'm going to just welcome you all. We are going to give about 30 more seconds so that we can settle. And we will yield the floor to our Chair and Commissioner of Education, Charlene Russell Tucker. So we're just going to wait about 30 seconds. Just a reminder that the meeting is being recorded. Okay. With that said, Commissioner, for opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Ingrid, and Commission members. Welcome to our now third meeting of the Connecticut Remote Learning Commission. Boy, is time moving by rather quickly. So thank you for being here this meeting today, and frankly, this Thanksgiving week. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join our meeting today. For those, we have some visitors on, so they may not know, but Charlene Russell Tucker, Commissioner of Education and Chair of our Commission. And so pleased to welcome all of you and to introduce Ingrid Kennedy, Executive Director of the State Education Resource Center, who has been our able facilitator of our meetings. And so Ingrid, thank you. I'll turn things right over to you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Good afternoon. Irene, if you don't mind, if we can have the slide back up. So for our, as the Commissioner just mentioned, today we have guests that are joining us as being our third meeting together. I'm just going to do a quick review of what we have accomplished so far. Before I do that, just to remind every single one of us regarding those aspects of our virtual space that we have identified as needed within the content of be able to engage in reciprocal, interactive, and inclusive conversations. So we ask you to please keep your microphones muted. That is just your microphones, your perspective we want to hear. And if you have the capability to use your video, we ask you to do that. We definitely want to see you. If you have any questions, we ask you to use the chat feature to engage in conversations. And also, if you want your perspective to provide your perspective live, please make sure that you raise your hand so we know that you want your perspective in the space. In addition to that, as our guest today and as your colleagues provide the perspective, we ask you to use some of the emotion icons that we have, some of those emojis, just to demonstrate your engagement and are part of the members of the commission. If we can have the next one, please, Irene. Thank you. As members of the commission, we have agreed to 3 group norms, and under those 3 group norms, we have agreed that first of all, we are going to ensure that it's equitable participation. We will make sure that we pause. We will be open to constructive silence, and we will ensure to share the air of this space. Then we have agreed to be active listeners. That is, if we hear something, we will ask somebody to either paraphrase or ask others for them to provide us with their explanation. And most importantly, in order to be able to be an active listener, we need to be present. So we have agreed to do that. And finally, we have agreed to respect all perspectives, and that is we will assume positive intentions and we will take an inquiry base. We want to make sure that that is an aspect of our engagement, and through the last 2 meetings that we have together, that has been at the core of our participation. So let me give you a little bit of perspective. Thank you, Irene. We can put the slides down so we can see each other. Thank you so much. Let me just share with you what we have done so far as members of the Connecticut Remote Learning Commission. Our first meeting, we were introduced to the task of the commission by our chair, Commissioner Russell Tucker. We introduced ourselves to the norms, also to how we are going to engage when we need to make some decisions by consensus. At the first meeting, we engaged in conversations about some of the things that we wanted to hear. So we talked about, we wanted to get a little bit more insight about the current local perspective and the national perspective. As a result of our first meeting, we engaged in the second meeting in which we were able to listen to those who are currently in Connecticut engaged in remote learning and some of the programs. So we had the current context, our context. So we were able to hear a lot of information and a lot of exchange. Now, today, as part of our agenda, we are going to be introducing you to some information from our guests that are going to present the national context. So as you can see, 3 meetings we have engaged in a lot. We have looked at the legislation, what are the requirements in those items. And in order to begin to make decisions regarding our task and our efforts, we want to make sure that we are gathering information from the local context as well as the national context. Today will be the national context. Our guests are coming with us with their perspective. They are going to be asked a couple of key points in order to bring into our space, and then we will have the opportunity for you to ask questions as well. So they have been incredible. We are so grateful. Now is the time to be grateful now down this time for their participation today. So we're looking forward to for them to be introduced. And at this time, I'm actually going to ask Irene. And just give me just a second, Irene, just a minute, just to create a little bit of a context. Before we go into our guests, I will ask the commissioner if you want to present to the members of the task any questions or any perspectives that they have up to this point. My apologies. I'm going fast because I'm eager to hear the national perspective. Commissioner?
No, actually, and I understand, Ingrid, that I should maybe just roll back to a roll call as well. Yes. So, Irene, if you can lead that to make sure that all our commission members are accounted for.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
So I'll call your name, and if you could just open your mic and you can say here or present. Lon Seidman.
Here.
Kate Diaz.
Here.
Charles Dumais.
Here.
Fran Rabinowitz.
Here.
Lauren Mancini Averett.
Here.
Doug Casey.
Here. Good afternoon, everybody.
Catherine Gabrielson.
Here.
Evelyn Robles Rivas.
Here.
Ed Klinoski.
Here.
Michelle Levy.
Here.
Tim Larson. Tim Larson. Karen DuBois Walton.
Good afternoon. I'm here.
Amy Wiltsey. Amy Wiltsey. And Rosie O'Brien Wojtek.
Here.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. All accounted for.
Thank you very much. And we sent the agenda out. There was also an article on students attending school remotely suffer socially, emotionally, and academically. Was an article. Chip, thank you for sharing that with us. We sent that out to the members so members could have that information as well. We should, moving forward as well, we sent out the minutes for the meeting and also wanted to take an opportunity here to get acceptance for the minutes. At this point, I guess we'll do it in the reverse. Are there any issues or concerns, additions, corrections to the minutes?
I just need to have the spelling of my name is not correct.
Okay, go ahead, Kate.
So it can either be Kate or it's Catherine, Kathryn. Whatever you want.
We'll go short with Kate. How's that?
Works for me.
Thank you, Kate. Any other comments, corrections on our questions on the minutes? If not, do we have consent for accepting the minutes as, and you can literally, all right, I see thumbs up, right, perfect. Awesome. Thank you all very much. And so we don't have any new members today, and our agenda was to introduce new members and to really revisit the purpose and tasks of our commission. But we've done that now in 2 meetings, and so with the same members, is there, what I would do instead of going through that, are there any questions or wonderings as you've been processing, hearing about our purpose and tasks? Or just questions you have about the commission's work, we can use that in that space just to answer those questions before we introduce our guests and go into that portion of our meeting. So feel free, any wonderings based on our statement of task, anything like that? Okay, I think I see Kate's hand is up.
I'm just, I'm hearing a lot of legislative rumblings about there being interest in pursuing the Massachusetts program and implementing that program imminently. I'm a little bit wondering how that impacts the work of this commission if the legislators bring forward sort of an adoption, if you will, of the program in Massachusetts. Is there anything kind of that you could offer about that?
Well, thank you, Kate. I can offer that I was invited to the meeting. I think that there's a meeting that's coming up with the folks from Massachusetts in the legislature. I can share with you, I know Laura, our legislative liaison, is here. We did ask for for those who invited the group and to invite the commission. We reminded folks of the work of the commission, and basically ask them to please send an invitation to the Remote Learning Commission so that we can be in that space to learn more about that program and to ask questions as needed. So that's what I've affirmatively done. And I don't think I got a response yet, but that's where we are, Kate. I literally reminded folks of the work of the commission as statutorily, as it is in statute for the work we need to do.
All right. So I guess I'll keep checking my email then.
That's right. And we'll follow up. Desi, could you will follow up for us with Laura, because she did communicate that for us. I wanted this commission there so that we could, as a group, also learn from the information that the legislators would also be receiving. Thank you for that. Other questions or wonderings? Well, I am sure you can certainly give us those questions as we keep moving forward. But I'm really eager myself, as Ingrid stated, to hear from the national context from these 2 states who've been at this ahead of us. And I think we may have a lot to learn here from their presentations. So I'm going to turn, I think Irene or Ajit, I think will be introducing our visitors today.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. So as we've discussed in our previous meetings, the use of technology for online or blended learning has been used statewide as well as across the nation for many years. And to the points that have been raised previously by this commission and the commission members, we want to understand further the role of teachers, the role of students, the governance, the funding, and all other components of infrastructure that are required to be able to launch a remote or a virtual learning school. So as we had shared already, we reached out to 2 state models, and we are very fortunate to have members of each model speak with us today and share briefly some key items. Let me advance. What we've identified are these items here. We want to understand further, like why, what was the purpose for creating this particular model? What was or what is the governance and structure of your model? What does student enrollment look like? Certainly, how do you enroll students? What's the staffing model? Where does the content or curriculum come from? How do you provide for those extracurriculars such as special education, athletics, and more? What is the funding model, and what have been your successes and your challenges? So I'll pause there and hand it over to my colleague Ajit for any further introduction of our first panel is Florida Virtual School.
Thanks, Irene. When we were planning the agenda and we were looking for national models to come forward, the first one I thought of was Florida Virtual. I remember being in distance learning conversations in the late 1990s, the last decade, and Florida Virtual was prominent then. And I remember talking to Florida Virtual folks at that point, and sure enough, when this opportunity came up, I reached back out to my colleagues at the Florida Department of Education, and they connected me with two fantastic folks you're going to hear from. I want to thank Sandra Eggers from Florida Department of Education, Program Specialist at the Florida Department of Education. Thank you, Sandra, for joining our meeting and sharing your expertise. And I'd also like to welcome Dr. Louise Algaze, who is the President and CEO of Florida Virtual School. So I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Algaze, to get us going. And Sandra, I trust that's okay, and you can, of course, jump in anytime you want. Great.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you for the invite. It's a pleasure meeting you all. So yes, as Ajit had mentioned, we've been around since the last century, for about 24 years. The concept was originated as a grant application between two counties within Florida. Florida has 67 counties. Each county runs their own school district. And these two counties created an online school. You can imagine it was on a modem with all the screeching noises and everything just to get online. And we started with about 70 students in high school, and they worked online with a few teachers and courses. So over the years, we've created our own curriculum, over 190 courses. We've perfected what we've done. We've worked with the Department of Education of expanding from those 70 kids to currently we serve about 250,000 students in the state of Florida. And we serve them in several different ways. We have our own full-time school district throughout, it encompasses the entire state. We have elementary, middle, and senior high school. And we also partner with the districts to provide our curriculum and our platforms using their teachers for them to have online curriculum for themselves. And they use that with us in each one of the districts. And then we also have part-time options for students within those districts who want to get ahead or need to make up courses or have an interest or a passion in something, or they want to have a flexibility with their time to be able to do other things that they'd like to do, athletes, for instance, professional athletes, student athletes. And what they do is, on some of those are in our full-time, but in the part-time model, we supplement other schools' content so that they can take courses with us, again, to catch up, to get ahead, to fill whatever need they have. We also have done this outside of Florida. We run our, as you can see back here, FlexPoint is our national brand. And we lease content to schools, school districts, states, in other countries, individuals, students in other countries and within the state as a tuition-based, for instance. And all of our content is available to them. We are governed by a board of trustees that is appointed by the governor of the state of Florida. And we have, our board meetings with them and myself and my team as we go ahead, and they set policies and we go ahead and implement those policies and execute. Our current student enrollment, as I mentioned, we serve 250,000 students throughout the state. In our full-time school district, we have approximately 12,000 students. Last year, as you can imagine, with the pandemic, it increased quite a bit. And this year, we've only lost 400 or 500 students from that number. So we doubled in size after the pandemic and have pretty much maintained that size because the parents, the families have indicated that this is an option that they would like to continue. We were created in order to provide choice for families in the state legislature, and we are a product of state legislation. We have our statute that pretty much delineates everything that we're supposed to be doing and how we do it. And that's with, you can find that in our, if you need that, I can always send that to you so you can look at it. Our staffing, we hire our own teachers. We have a waiting list. As you can imagine, when we doubled in size, we had to do a whole lot of interviewing, a whole lot of teachers. Fortunately, we had a huge waiting list of applicants from which to pick. So we were able to get our teachers on board pretty quick. And we're able to scale up to what we needed to in order to do so. I mentioned that we create our own curriculum. We do lease some third-party curriculum, very little. The majority of what we have is ours. We have used our content and curriculum and teachers in other states. For example, Alaska. They were working with us before the pandemic, and when the pandemic hit, they had a huge urgency to get us to help them quickly onboard folks. So we had to use our own teachers and our content and our courses and our platforms, our technological platforms. And then we do a lot of training. So we train their teachers on how to use our stuff, and they went ahead and they've taken it over themselves. They currently use our content, and they use their platform and their teachers. We have a district name just because it's they haven't given us permission to, so but that has currently, and they just increased their numbers recently, a district in Kentucky that is using our teachers. That they have a teacher shortage there in that area, so they're using our teachers, our content, our platforms, and they're using quite a bit of it. They've expanded substantially. And then again, there are many other districts and states that are working with us doing the same. In terms of extracurriculars, again, so the 250,000 students are primarily from their own school districts, so they are eligible for their own extracurricular within their school districts because they are their school district's kids and they're using us supplementally. But those students that are with us full-time have access to their neighborhood schools for any of those, and that, again, that's in statute, for any of those extracurriculars. And additionally, we provide extracurriculars as well. We do have, I think, over 60 clubs that students can join. And again, as you can imagine, we do so virtually. We try to avoid the word remote. I know you're the Remote Learning Commission because that has been kind of tied to the disaster that happened with the pandemic. And so what we like to explain is that online schooling, when it's done correctly, can be extremely beneficial. And I have some data to show you here in a moment, which is something that we do because we are school district. All of our students are held accountable like any other school student in our state. We have school accountability measures in reading and math, reading, language arts and math, science and social studies in certain grade levels. And our scores are compared to every other scores in the state, the school districts within the state. Our funding is based on completion. If a student does not successfully complete the course, which means they pass the course, A, B, C, or D, we do not get funded. So a student that fails, we don't get funded for it. Conversely, in the seat time model, if a student fails, often they come to us to try to make up those courses, or they retake the course within the school district they're in and get refunded, not refunded, funded again for that course to take it again in order to see if they can be successful a second time around. But we have a lower dollar for what we call FTE, full-time equivalent student. And because, again, we don't have a lot of the ancillary costs associated with us, like a cafeteria or, school buses or custodians, etc. So we have a lower dollar amount per FTE, and we do not get that FTE unless the student completes successfully the course. And successes and challenges, we've pretty much managed them over the years. For example, a lot of students initially might register for a course and then not take it. Some of the school districts, since we're actually sharing funding with them, sometimes, there's some struggles there. But communication, pretty much helps. And our State Department of Education is a super. They're spectacularly supportive. And we're able to really manage a lot of those challenges through there. Successes, if I may share here. Let me make a little spreadsheet. So as I mentioned, we test students at different grade levels in our state, and give me a second so I can figure out which is the share. Here we go. I'm used to using Zoom.
It's the up arrow.
I got it, yeah.
Okay. Sure, no problem.
Technological school, I better figure it out, right? And now if I can just find my file.
If you have multiple screens, there'll be a red box around the screen that's being displayed or you want to display.
Hey, is that showing okay?
Yep.
All right. So here on the left-hand column there, the assessments, those are the tests that we provide or offer to the students. And then this column C is the average that the states had last year. And again, given it was pandemic year, then the number of our full-time students that took each one of these tests. Column G is our scores. Column I is the number of flex students that took our tests. Those are the students, again, that are with their school districts, but they took those classes with us. And so their test scores are reflective of those classes that they took with us. And then their scores. And again, in flex, it's our teachers, our content, our platforms. And then over here, columns N and O are full-time versus the state, and our flex versus the state difference. And as you can see, in almost every case, double digits higher than the state average during the pandemic year. We doubled our number. We took everybody that wanted to come to us. We opened the doors and let them in. And they took, the test when they took their tests. And this is the average down here, the average score difference, state average and our average. So the point there is, if it's done right, it can be very, very beneficial. All right, stop sharing. There we go. All right. I think I addressed most of the points that were there, if not all of them. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them or address them in any way.
Ingrid?
Yes, thank you. I see that we have two of our members. They have, I have a couple of hands up. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab a couple of questions now because we have a set of our guests that are going to be presenting, and we will come back to make sure that we have enough time to be able to engage in the conversations. So I saw that Evelyn, you had a question, and then Dr. Karen Dubois after. So Evelyn, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I do have a question. Number one, are all your teachers certified to teach in the content areas that they're teaching? And number two is, how diverse is your staff? Do you have special ed teachers included in your staff, and also bilingual or ESOL teachers included in those in your staff as well?
Yes and yes. Goodness, I answered the questions before listening to them. What was your first question? I know the answer was yes, but I want to
certification.
Yes, they are all Florida certified in their subject areas. Some of them are certified in other states as well, because we do work with some other states. We are SACS accredited. Well, now it's Cognia accredited, and also accredited in the West Coast with the commission that does the California and Western Coast states. We're accredited with them as well, and CAA has also approved our courses. We do have special ed students. About 12% of our student population is special education, where it's appropriate. Obviously, it has to be inappropriate, and we do have IEP meetings with the parents and the staff, and if it's coming from a district, and we're sharing with the district, with their staff as well, to make sure that it's appropriate and it's going to meet the needs of the student. And so many of them are very successful because we are asynchronous primarily, but we do have synchronous Teams or Zoom meetings with the students in groups individually when they need the help. They're successful because they have all the time they need to do whatever they need to do, as opposed to the clock time that they have to sit and do and have to try to catch it as they can. So a lot of those students thrive with us. And to be honest with you, that's one of the largest groups we had come back to us after they started with us in the pandemic, because they saw that there were benefits to them. ELL, we only have about 3% of our students who are ELL. As you can imagine, being asynchronous, there's a lot of reading that has to be done. So their reading has to be relatively proficient. However, we do have ELL students that might be on the higher end of the ELL grouping. And they do get help with our ELL teachers who are also certified in ESOL or ELL endorsements. Likewise, our ESE teachers are ESE endorsed as well, or certified.
Thank you.
Thank you. Karen?
Yes, thank you. Your previous answer is starting to get to what I'm curious about, which is what you've learned over these years about the students that opt in. What is that sort of? What are the characteristics of students who opt into this model? What are the characteristics that you've noted about, who it works really well for? So you're starting to touch on a little bit about more, but if you could flesh that out for me.
Yeah, it's really, really diverse. We have some really high flying, and I didn't include that. Our AP scores are about 11, 12 points above the national average of AP scores. So we have students on that end of the spectrum. We just started our Cambridge program, which is associated with the University of Cambridge. And they scored in the 90% of them passed the exam, 95, 95, and 93, I think, with the 3 exams that we offered this year. So we have some students that are high performers, as you can imagine, and we have, as we mentioned, the ESE students and students, athletes, as I mentioned earlier, that want to have the time to be able to have their, perform their sports. We have some families that travel across the United States, and their kids can do their, they go to the state parks and visit them, and meanwhile they're taking their content with us on the road. So that it meets a lot of needs, and what's kind of counterintuitive, and I've had the opportunity last year, I spent talking to all my teachers, and I have several thousand of them, meeting them in groups. And what's counterintuitive is you think remote learning, that the teachers are not going to have a whole lot of time with the kids. What I heard from almost all of them to a T is this actually gives them more quality time with each student, because instead of having a class of 30, as they say, they have 30 classes of 1, because they get to work with them individually to a greater degree, and with their parents, because we're required to, we require our teachers to communicate with the parents as well. Yeah, and I see the Sandy put up there. We have about 15% of our student body is homeschool students. They come and they work with us, and that's a lot of those, for example, those student athletes would be homeschool students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So what I'm going to ask our members to please jot down the questions that you have for Dr. Agassi, so that we can come back to you. We have the order of you who want to ask questions, but because we have a second guest, so we want to make sure that you're listening to our next guest, so then maybe your questions are going to be combined. I just want to make sure that we're conscious about the time. So we have the order. We are not losing you. We just want to make sure that we move to our next guest. So thank you for understanding. So Irene Ajid, to introduce our next panel of guests. Dr. Agassi, thank you so much for your information. And I know there's plenty of questions coming your way, so thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ingrid. And yes, thank you, Florida Virtual team, for sharing your history and the journey. We really appreciate it. Another history and journey that we were really curious about was what was happening in Virginia. And so Superintendent Lane and his team were very accommodating in the questions that I had. And we have 2 members from from Virtual Virginia to speak with us. So I'd like to introduce Assistant Superintendent of Learning and Innovation, Michael Bowling, and I believe the Director of Virtual Virginia, Brian Mott, to share again their journey, their experience, and providing more information regarding the same questions of why, what was the purpose, what does enrollment look like, what has been the history, and how do learners access this while still staying connected to their district. So Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
That sounds great. Thanks, Irene. Can you hear me okay? Just want to make sure.
Yes, you're good.
Okay. No sense in talking a while and then being muted out. It's so good to be with you all today. Thanks for the opportunity to share. Virtual Virginia has been an entity for quite a while in Virginia as well, and started out as really a satellite learning program that was offered to students over television. I guess probably 30 years ago, and Brian, you can probably correct me if I'm wrong. But anyway, since then we've had a lot of different iterations, a lot of growth. Certainly during the pandemic, that impacted Virtual Virginia. And so I'm going to turn it over to Brian Mott, who's our executive director. One important designation, and this is different than Florida Virtual, is that Virtual Virginia is a program of the Department of Education. And it is, so our students they stay enrolled in their locality, and the money flows to the locality, and they pay Virtual Virginia for tuition. So just a little bit different models. So anyway, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Mott to provide you with more detail.
Thanks, Michael. And thanks everybody else for inviting us this afternoon, particularly during a pretty important basketball game going on in Connecticut right now. So, or I think it's out of the state, but it involves UConn. So I won't spoiler alert what happened there. As mentioned, I'm the executive director at Virtual Virginia. And let's start at the top. What is Virtual Virginia? Virtual Virginia, we are the DOE's online course K-12, statewide LMS and digital content, and professional learning provider to students and educators across the Commonwealth. So Virtual Virginia has quite a wide scope at K-12 in the state, not only providing instruction and courses, but also providing each school division, we call them divisions here in the Commonwealth, each school division with a statewide LMS and access to K-12 digital content as well. And of course, that professional learning space, we all know that's transformed as well over the last several years as that has transitioned to online and really being able to scale those offerings across the state. And how it works is, in a sense, Virtual Virginia and Virginia Public School divisions, we partner together to ensure that learners have access and opportunity that complement those available in the physical school. Years ago, as you mentioned, Virtual Virginia has been around for a long time. It used to be one school of thought was we're trying to replace what is happening in schools. And we're not trying to replace what's happening there. We're trying to complement and expand those offerings that physical schools provide their learners. So our program structure is a little bit different than Florida, as we referenced earlier. The leadership for the Virtual Virginia program is done at the VDOE and Virtual Virginia level. So Michael and I work together regularly on the direction of the program and strategy for the program. There's also offices under Michael that have staff as well that support Virtual Virginia. There is a fiscal agent for the program, and it is run through a public school division, but day-to-day program management is done by the Virtual Virginia administration. So that public school really just functions in that fiscal role. All of our content and curriculum is created in-house by our Virtual Virginia curriculum team. And in Virginia, we have state standards of learning, and our curriculum is aligned to those standards. And enrollment, student services, and extracurriculars, similar to Florida, are run through the local enrolling school. So local schools enroll through, students enroll through the local school into Virtual Virginia. All the student services are provided by local school staff, and access to extracurriculars is managed through the local school as well. Now, as I mentioned, we do have several components in our program. We call the first one the complementary program. That's K-12 instruction run by Virtual Virginia teachers, and I'm going to highlight that today. Our outreach program, that is that statewide learning management system I spoke about a moment ago, and the K-12 content we make available at no cost for all educators in the state. Our professional learning program, again, that is also no cost for Virginia public educators. And our summer learning program, we know that summer learning is going to go through quite a bit of an evolution going forward as those months become critical. And we offer opportunities for learners in grades 3 through 12 in both courses and instruction and enrichment. But today, let's focus on that complementary program, that K through 12 piece I think you all are most interested in. As I mentioned earlier, it is a partnership. Virtual Virginia and the public school partner together to try and create the environment for successful online learning, each part doing what they're best at. So at Virtual Virginia, we provide access to content, resources, the instruction, which is the teacher of record, and the online learning environment. The public school provides two roles. The first is the counselor role and a mentor. The counselor can be anybody at the school, but we just need somebody to be that pass-through to enroll the student. And the mentor is the individual who interacts and supports students on a regular basis. Any textbooks, materials, and student services are also the responsibility of the enrolling school. And as I mentioned, we're both doing what we're strong at, right? So the public school and Virtual Virginia come together to create the environment that best supports online learning. Here's a little bit of history of our enrollment. As you can see, this year, and there's an asterisk next to those numbers for this year, we have grown quite a bit, but these are just fall numbers. We haven't hit the spring yet. So Virtual Virginia has been growing for, we've been online since 2006. We've been growing every year since then, but obviously, as a result of the pandemic, the growth has sped up over the last 2 years. As Michael mentioned, the program has its roots in a satellite program where students would watch courses on satellite and be able to phone their instructor live. I'd almost pay money to go back and see those. And we actually have one of our staff still on who was a satellite teacher back in the 90s who's still with us. But it has transitioned to fully online now. And we are a heavily synchronous model. So I know Florida mentioned they're a little bit more on the asynchronous side. We do daily synchronous with our learners who are enrolled. So students enrolled as part-time students can have daily synchronous large group, small group, and one-to-one opportunities with their teacher. Students who are enrolled full-time have several opportunities for large group, small group, and one-to-one with their teacher, just based on the number of courses they're enrolled in. Our faculty has also grown, obviously, in concert with our student enrollment. And this year, we have kind of seen some interesting stats. We have, traditionally, we've had more more part-time teachers than full-time teachers. This year, as the number of teachers has grown, we've actually flipped to becoming more full-time oriented and still a good number of part-time, but fewer than we had last year because we find most students are online during the day. Now, as I mentioned, there are other programs that Virtual Virginia provides to learners as well. We talked about the complementary program, our K-12 instruction piece there. The outreach program, that is the statewide learning management system. We do provide Canvas at no cost to public school divisions across the state. And each public school division now, as of this fall, has their own instance. So 132 divisions now have 132 instances of Canvas, reaching 1.3 million students and roughly 100,000 educators across the state. So Virtual Virginia proudly serves up to 1.4 million learners per year. Our professional learning program, as I mentioned, that is free for public educators. We have about 80,000 enrollments in our professional learning offerings this year. Very excited about that program and where it continues to go in the future. And our summer session program, as we anticipate additional challenges for school divisions, not only staffing, but also transportation to continue during those summer months, we expect our summer learning program to grow as well. And this year, to accommodate for that growth, we used to have one cohort for summer learning that would run from mid-June to the end of July. This year, we're going to have two cohorts as we have varying school calendars across the state, an early June to a mid-July, and then a late June to a late July cohort to accommodate differing school schedules. And some of the successes in well, just one challenge really listed here, but some of the successes we've experienced over the last couple of years, recruitment. Similar to Florida, you know, we have a lot of interest in our program. We have a lot of teachers who want to teach virtually. And so we've had a really strong recruitment effort, even pre-pandemic, to not just recruit teachers, but every teacher that is hired with us has to go through a training with Virtual Virginia course just to be interviewed. So even in the pre-interview stage, we have them participate in Virtual Virginia onboarding in some respect. That partnership with school divisions, that's critical for us. And we've really seen that partnership grow. We're very excited about where it's going, not only in the spring, but into 22, 23 as well. So that partnership now, we can put names with faces, and in divisions, we know who to contact. They know who to contact on our team. We regularly meet with those folks. You know, just today, we've met with two divisions, just talking about updates about what's happening in the program. We continue to do those meetings just to establish those relationships. Engagement has been a huge success. We've engaged our staff. As I mentioned, our staff has grown dramatically in the last 4 to 5 months even. So we continue to engage with our staff, doing things like weekend hikes across the state. We do staff challenges, you know, to keep everybody engaged and to feel that community. engaging students. Students want to use technology, and we want them to use it too. So we engage our students through regular interaction. We allow them to do push notifications from our LMS system to their cell phones. So it's really good for students to be engaged, not only when they're online and learning, but also when there's necessary information for them to be successful. And then parents and guardians, we do a big push with parents and guardians to engage them in the program, particularly with the orientation in the beginning, but then we constantly keep them plugged in and communicated not only with the program, but with their individual teachers, because that relationship is critical. We've always thought when you have, relevant and engaging content, when you have a strong educator, and you have support at home, when you have those three things working together, most students can be successful online. And then quality. Virtual Virginia, we take a strong approach to quality in everything we do. We were big proponents of the National Standards for Quality, the NSQ, developed by the VLLA and Quality Matters. We were authors to those quality standards, and we are at the table for those revisions every year as well. So quality really is our footprint and our legacy, and we are excited to see where that goes and takes us in the future. I will list one of the challenges we've had is just this year, welcoming so many new, division personnel into our partnership. That does create some challenges, right? And making sure that people know who to go to get the information they need, ensuring that parents are going on the right path, because you don't want to create frustration. So we try to streamline everything as easily as we can. But whenever you have new people coming into those school roles of the mentor or the school counselor, those who support the students, we just want to make sure that they are up to speed as quick as possible. And, we start a few weeks before the school year begins, and usually things do calm down after a few weeks, but it's always a challenge every year. And this year we just scaled up quite a bit with the number of students we have. But overall, people have settled in quite nicely with that challenge.
Hey, Brian, I'm just going to add in a couple things. This is Michael. Couple things is, number one, in school divisions in Virginia all start at different times. And we have some that are even year round. So we do have 3 different cohorts of students that start in a full-time program. So that's a staggered start. So some start in the middle of August and some start in September, just so you have a feel, 1 to 2 weeks apart. And, we can get into the weeds on that if you want to. The second thing I wanted to bring up was the fact that, just to reiterate that the students' scores on state testing for federal accountability and state accountability go back to their local school, like where they are enrolled. And so they stay enrolled there. They are just being served by our program. And so I think that that's a really important designation. It's quite different than Florida Virtual. We are not an accredited school. And so we're just a program that is serving kids. And so with that, I do want to say thank you to Brian for a great overview of that program and its offerings. And it's really, he's been nimble, flexible, and as we all have been, but he's been steering a big ship. So my thanks to him. And please let us know if you have questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Michael. Thank you. Thank you to all of you, Brian as well, and Dr. Agassi for your presentation. So I know that our members of the committee have a lot of questions. I see hands up, and I have a list of those ones who have their hands up, just to make sure that we honor your request. So I know, Fran, you had a question before, as well as Kate. So if you want to, let's go. I'm going to go with Fran first, and then Kate, you will be next. Fran?
It's a fairly simple question, I think. I was a bit confused with Florida. I think I'm straighter with Virginia, but on the curriculum issue, who creates the curriculum? I wasn't quite sure whether it was you were talking about individual districts, or do your teachers that are teaching virtually create the curriculum? Is it one curriculum for everyone, and whether they're part-time or full-time? How does that work?
Okay. So our state has standards, and our curriculum is created to the state standards. We create it all. I have a team of 100 curriculum developers over 100, and which includes some. What we have, you can think of as an interactive virtual textbook for each course. So English 1 has its own course with its own content and its own interactives. English 2 has its own. Honors English 2 has its own. So all of it is created individually by us in-house, made to the standards, and Florida just recently changed its standards for the upcoming year. So we've been spending the past year and a half updating all of our courses. Essentially, it's the same as every other state, very similar to the national standards, because English is English, math is math, science is science. But there are some things that might be specific to the Florida standards that we go ahead and make sure we create. And with some of the states that we work with, we do similar things with them as well.
Okay, Louis. So let me just ask you if I could, as a follow-up on that, if I could just ask you, when you say a book, you're not talking a commercial book, right? You're talking a curriculum that.
Yeah, when I say a book, I mean, think of the content in a textbook that a student needs in order to learn the content of a course.
Yeah.
What we create is an online course. If you go to our website, flvs.net, and you can go and you can sample some of the courses, for example, some of the elementary, senior, middle school, and you get an idea of what it is. There's a content to be read, there's an activity to be done, an assessment to be taken, and then they can move on to the next section, etc.
Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you. Kate?
So it's interesting because you guys are so different in some respects in terms of student management and in some respects. So I guess my question is, when a student is not being successful, what happens at that point? If because it sounds like they all self-select to get into the programs. They kind of, this is student family initiated to go to access this opportunity. But what if they're not successful? Like, how does that kind of go?
And it depends also. School teacher counselors at the actual school sites within their district for our part-timers are often the ones who initiate, hey, go take this course so you can try to make up the course, or so you can get ahead, etc. We have some early graduators. So we are in constant communications with parents. They are, when they register, we have all of our teachers have a Google phone account and texting account. Students prefer to use the texting over all other forms of communication, but we do have the Zoom, the Teams available as well for them. And with the parents, our teachers have an initial call with the parents, and they also have follow-up calls with the parents throughout the course to let them know where and on the student dashboard, it's automatically updates them to what portion of the courses they have completed and what grade they have to date as they go along. So it's constantly being shown to them, where they are, whether they're on pace, whether they are getting the grade or not. So 93% of our students, after they've been, starting the course with us for 2 weeks, complete the course. And again, they have as much time as they need.
That was one of the follow-ups I had with that. When you say they have as much time as they need, what does that mean? Like, is there a semester, a year,
so
2
we
years?
have kids who finish, we have some kids who finish a year-long course in a semester. And I can tell you, as a brick and mortar principal, I put my honors biology students in the lab. We also run labs with the school districts where they have, let's say, a library with 100 computers, all their kids in there. They have someone overseeing the kids, but our teachers are the ones who work with the kids in whatever course they have. And we communicate with them as well to make sure that they know which kid is in what part of the course, if they're on pace to finish, because school districts and our full-time have the time box from 180-day school year. But our flex students, they can start at any time of the year. They can start in October, they can start in November, and they can finish, whenever they need to finish. They can finish during the summer. They don't have to finish in June. They can continue and take that time if they need it in order to complete it. So some of our kids finished early, and as I was saying, I had the honors kids taking a PE class and a science lab at the same time, a full year course, 2 full year courses in one time block of the student day. so they can make up additional credits because they could. They had the capacity of being able to do so.
Kate, ours is a little different, similar to what Florida's doing, but a little different, a little wrinkle. We have due dates throughout our courses, and there are penalties if students don't turn in work. It's all automated. It's systemic across the program that it's consistent. But they have flexibility to work whenever they want on the assignments before those assignments are due, right? So we have a 180-day calendar. Students do have start and end dates. They do have due dates for all their coursework, but they have flexibility during those the week or whenever that work is due to turn it in. So we try to provide them benchmarks, but also give them flexibility at the same time. And if student grades start slipping, we have leveraged automation like every other industry now, right? We are leveraging automation within the LMS, within the SIS. So if a student drops below a 70, all the stakeholders get a warning. Hey, Brian's dropped below a 70. It could be due to factors of missing assignments, took a couple days off, a long weekend. Just check in with them and see what's going on. When I drop below a 50, everybody gets that message that we're at critical. We need to have a conference, right? We need to get together with the school, the parent, guardian, and the student, come up with a PACE recovery plan and implement that plan. So, we want to be as communicative as possible with everybody that's involved, with all the stakeholders, particularly when students start to slip, because that does happen even with some of your better students during the years. They may take a few days off or they may miss an assignment. We just want everybody to be aware and get that student back on track.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Lon, I have you next, and then Kathy after.
Great, thank you. One of the things that I've been struggling with on this commission is that our data points have been really consistent in that the online experience for students has not been as good as the in-person. Now, granted, we've been kind of doing a crash course in online learning in this state because we really weren't doing it before. I'm curious, for both our guests, do you have data that compares the performance of students that are receiving a majority of their instruction online versus those who are in school in person? Is there data beyond just pass-fail or grade level or grade passing, class passing scores, report cards, if you will, versus state data?
But what I showed was state data. That's the assessment on the language arts and the math exams, end of course exams.
Oh, so that wasn't passing the class. That was actual state assessment.
Oh, no, yeah. That was the assessments for the accountability system in the state of Florida.
Okay, great, thank you. And how about social and emotional?
I was going to address that because when you all mentioned that at the very beginning of the article, and it is a concern. It has to be a concern. So we have about 30, and we just got our legislature to pass last year, not passed, to include us in a mental health allocation that they have had for all schools in the school district in the state for a while. And we have over 35 mental health professionals on staff in order to work with our students and their families.
So that would include an at-home visit if a student was really struggling?
It includes resources for them to be able to get to a face-to-face if they need that. Not necessarily our people going out to them, but being able to get to them.
So you could provide a service. You would have a connection to a service provider that could get.
Yes, that they could get.
Ours is very similar. Yeah, we remain connected to the school, so the school still remains responsible for all those services. But our regular communication, we do provide input to schools as part of our relationship.
Thank you both. Kathy, thank you for your question, Lon.
So I wanted to delve into the special education aspect a little bit deeper with both of you. I understand in Virginia, you're sort of an adjunct to the public system, and I wasn't clear on whether or not the Florida virtual school was, but I'm curious about your IDEA mandates and how you fall into being required to follow both IDEA and 504 mandates, as well as delivering services to any student with a disability who may want to access remote schooling through you.
So for students to enroll in virtual Virginia, they go through their school first, right? So the school enrolls the students. We don't let the parent or the guardian bypass the school. They go, unless they're a homeschool student, then they enroll as a homeschool student. But enrolling through the school, when the student is enrolled, they do share the 504 IEP accommodations with us. We have a conference with the school at that time as well to make sure that how these accommodations are going to be met online, because they can be very different from face to face when you implement those accommodations. And then we can also tie an observer role. So a case manager or somebody at the local school can be assigned an observer role in the learning management system with the student to have a parallel experience to see what they're studying, the content. They can attend the live sessions with the learner in privacy. We've also had to do several interpreters as well at our live sessions, to sign the actual live instructions, since we do that daily with our students. So, it is that collaboration, that partnership with those school-based services that really help those students be successful. And why that partnership is so important is because, even historically, many of our learners will transition between online and face-to-face. It's important for the school to remain plugged in on the growth of that student, right? Just as opposed to coming and going. So even as we go forward, in the post-pandemic, virtual space, we do anticipate there will be a lot more coming and going, a lot more portability, right? And we want to make sure that the school is plugged into that learner as tightly as they can be.
Okay. I just have a follow-up with you, Brian. You said that they give you the accommodations. Are you basically sharing or implying through that the school system in person continues to be fully responsible for the implementation of the actual services in the IEP and the addressing of goals and objectives, that your teachers would not be doing that?
We do obviously apply the sensible accommodations that can be applied online, but for students that need that one-to-one in person, that does remain the responsibility of the school.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Kathy. I am going to move us on to two other questions.
If I may, 'cause
go ahead.
I don't think I think
sorry, my
she
apologies.
get the answer. So yes, we do comply with IDEA completely. And again, depending on the model that the student's in, if they're in our flex program where they're, as Brian mentioned, with the district carries the primary responsibility for their IEP. If they're our student, we carry the primary responsibility for the IEP. And if they're a flex student, they have accommodations, we're responsible for providing those accommodations as appropriate. So we do comply with all.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you so much for that. I have a couple of other questions that a couple of our members want to ask, but I need to present to our members. I'm being very conscious of the time. This is an incredibly rich conversation. We're getting a lot of information, and we have a couple of other items on the agenda. I would like to propose that we continue with this discussion and we rearrange our agenda, because I know that you want to get as much information. So if I could get a thumbs up from the members so that we have reached consensus to ensure that we continue with this conversation from our guests. I see. Okay. It seems that we are moving forward. Fantastic. Thank you so much. I do not want to rush this dialogue, but I want to make sure that we are in consensus as we're moving forward. Thank you so much. So now I have Michelle Levy. Michelle?
Yes, thank you. I was interested in hearing about how enrollment is spread across the ages. It sounds like you both provide virtual schooling K through 12. So I wanted to learn a little both about the differences in enrollment and also what that experience is like, how that differs for really young elementary students versus older high school students. We would expect that would be a little different experience. I wanted to learn a little more about how the developmental range is handled.
Brian, would you like to go first? Go ahead. I've been talking too much.
Yeah, sure. So as far as the experience goes, we have synchronous schedules that I'll share. The daily sort of experience for our learners is they do have access to the asynchronous content, again, that we create in-house, but where you really develop that community and that culture, that classroom culture that's important for learners of all ages, really is in that synchronous time. And so we have learners from all over the state who will be in classes together, kind of sharing out some of that FCL time too. Is it a snow day where you live? Because Virginia is very big geographically, or this is a festival we have here. And it's just important in that community building piece for them to share that in the synchronous side. As far as the breakdown of K through 5 and 6 through 12, I'm trying to grab that data right now, and I'll give it to you here in just a bit. So if Lewis wants to go ahead and share how they do some of their stuff, I should have in just a moment.
Yeah, there we go. So if it's clear enough. So you can see in our grades K through 5, we actually have a larger amount than our middle and high school. In this bar graph down here. And here we're looking at our returning students versus our new students coming back. And this is, again, 11,600 students. And that's in our full-time program. In our part-time program, I don't have these graphs exactly the same, again, because they're not our students, technically. They're similar, except we have more high school students in the flex program and the part-time program.
Thank you. It's very interesting.
Brian.
I'm sorry, and to the school day and what they see, there is a lot more, as Brian mentioned, for the younger ones, a lot more synchronous activity with the teachers and the kids.
Yeah, let me share here. We have our current K through 5 breakdown. Yeah, I can just copy and paste this versus sharing the screen. Here we go. There it is. So K through 5 is that first column. We have 4,200 K through 5 full-time learners, and then full-time 6 through 12, we have 8,300, roughly 8,300 there. So about nearly double in 6 through 12, what is it full-time K through 5.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Doug?
Well, look at that. I was already off mute. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Lewis. This has been really, really helpful. I just had a quick question and comment. First of all, I appreciate the data. I think it helps us as we think about what we're sort of designing, envisioning that the outcomes are student learning and student health and success. So I really appreciate sort of the data that you shared, and it's impressive. It's also a good reminder that when done well, online learning can function really well. I think it might have been Lewis who said avoiding remote learning, maybe more like online learning. I know we didn't name this commission, the General Assembly did, but thinking about students maybe taking courses while they're physically in school, but just happen to be in that online modality. So the question that I have is the theme that I'm hearing over and over again is the importance of wraparounds and support services and coaching parents and students as to kind of where they belong, what their options are. What I'm hearing is Virginia Virtual is more partnering directly with the school districts, right? And it kind of makes sense as a sort of state entity. With Florida Virtual, it seems like there's more of a partnership, maybe directly with parents, et cetera, but could maybe both of you add a little bit more detail of how you provide those, I want to say like counseling services to help monitor and guide students on decision making and where they are in the courses? I know you touched a little bit about this, but I'd like to get a sense for us, because I think that's a key to the success of students in any online school is just those wraparounds and those supports. So I'll just pause there and listen.
Well, the first step in those supports is obviously the teacher, right? The teacher is it's such a resource for any online learner, and providing access to that teacher. As I mentioned, we give them opportunities for daily one-to-one. A student can request a one-to-one with their teacher 5 days a week at Virtual Virginia, and that's important. The second piece is we have instructional coaches. We have an administration. You could title them whatever you want to call them, but internally we have instructional coaches who identify students. It could be students who are struggling. It could be students who are successful. I mentioned we have that automated early warning system in place for students who are. We have the same automated system for students who are successful at the same time, right? It shouldn't be just students who are slipping behind who get warned. It should be every student receives some sort of an update. And so, it starts there. It starts with the day-to-day interaction. It starts with the automation you're leveraging. And we talked about the two models between Florida and Virginia. In our model, there is a role at the school called the mentor. And the mentor is a school-based personnel, and that individual has more the day-to-day interaction with the students and does coordinate with the school as well on things like career planning or course planning even as well, down to the course level. So we do some of that in-house with personnel on our side. We do leverage the automation, and we also do rely on that mentor role at the schools to help support those learners.
And again, for our part-time students, the counselors are the ones who help guide the students in terms of the counselors at the brick and mortar school and what courses they need in order to graduate on time. In our full-time program, we have our counselors, and then we have our student progression for graduation. And those counselors are the ones who guide them which courses they need. And again, in terms of the other wraparound services for the counseling, in terms of non-guidance counseling, but more social emotional type counseling, the counselors, depending on the severity of what the situation is, are either our mental health counselors or the guidance counselors as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for those great questions. Thank you so much to our guests as well. I'm going to offer another opportunity with any member of the commission that would like to ask questions at this point. I am checking to understand. Fran?
I'm sorry, I did not have a question.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay, not a problem. So, good. Irene?
Thank you, Ingrid. For both Florida and Virginia, I'm just wondering if you could share overall, like a broad stroke of what is the cost for such a structure that you have built, essentially, for all of the staffing, the wraparound supports. If you could provide a rough estimate of what the cost is for the structure, that would be helpful.
So our budget is around 250 million for all of it.
Ours total, including the statewide learning management system, all the professional learning, and then the students I referenced earlier, this year we're at 33 million.
Okay, thank you.
Also, I wanted to extend to you if at any point the commission needs it, I have an ESE specialist that I'll be glad to extend to you so you can, I know that's always a big concern when you're doing these things.
Thank you.
Ingrid, I had a question about governance, a little bit more about governance in both places, but certainly interested in Virginia. And again, my thanks to you all here. And I chatted with Commissioner Lane recently, and so thank you all for being here. So I was just interested in governance, especially on the Department of Education side. I understand from Florida you had an advisory, I think you said by the governor, appointed by the governor, if I'm not mistaken.
They're a board of trustees. They're similar to a school board in many ways, but since we're also a state agency, they're a board of trustees for the state agency as well.
In Virginia, so Brian's program works with me and my staff to coordinate his efforts and to oversee things like his budget and other pieces or initiatives within the program. And then the money, however, flows through a fiscal agent to pay teachers, to hire and pay teachers and benefits and things like that. But they have their own pay scale. And so I think that's it. Thank you. Sorry. One other thing to think about as you're thinking about logistics is kids like to play sports in Virginia. It's really important that they're connected to their home school division if they're going to be doing a virtual option, and so that's one of the reasons why our students belong to the home school division, and the ADM, the funding that flows directly for a student flows directly to their home school division, and then they pay us tuition. And so we can talk about our tuition, but on the whole, it's a sliding scale based on a local composite index of ability to pay. So some divisions have to pay more per child than others, depending on the economics of their system, of their school division. And again, remember, we have 132 school divisions in Virginia that are independently operated. Also, on terms of governance, Virtual Virginia has an advisory committee that's made up of representatives of each of the superintendent's regional groups, so of division superintendents and others from the Department of Education, as well as other agencies.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go in order. Doc, I just want to double check that you still have a question, or is this left over from the last time?
I have to lower my virtual hand.
All right. Thank you, Doc.
All set.
Thank you.
The only
Fran?
other,
Yep,
the
go
only
ahead.
the only other government piece I'd like to add is a lot of what governs us is legislation. The legislators are constantly coming and reconvening and deciding if there's anything else that needs to be tweaked in the virtual world.
Thank you so much for that. Fran,
I do
and
have a
then
question.
Kate?
I do have a question this time. First, I just want to thank the State Department of Education for bringing two very diverse schools to the table. It helps me a great deal. On the Virginia school, you talked about the districts paying tuition. My guess is that tuition would increase every year, depending on the costs. And for the state, for the Florida state, my guess is you would be bringing your budget forward to a State Department of Education or a legislature for increases. How would that work?
Well, you're asking the big question. We don't have plans to actually increase our tuition. We came up with a plan that we thought was solvent a couple of years ago, and so the aim is for us to stick with it. We don't plan on any increases, but you never know. So right now the plan is to stay where we are. I shared the fees in the chat as well, those links.
Okay, thank you.
We try to stay as break even as possible to keep it as affordable as possible for school divisions.
Okay, thanks.
Luis, your microphone is.
Yeah, I don't know. It keeps on getting turned off. You're correct in assuming that the State Department is the ones who calculate the amount of funds based on the full-time equivalent students.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kate, and then Lon.
I had actually two questions, and they're actually pretty easy. So that's good news. The first one is, are your teachers are they from your state, or are you pulling in teachers from around the country? And then my second question just was, what is your teacher to student ratio?
So in Virginia, the vast majority of our educators do live within the Commonwealth, but we have a heavy military family population, and they get moved around quite a bit. So we allow anybody who does leave the Commonwealth to maintain, obviously, as long as they're in good status with us, they can still teach for Virtual Virginia and maintain their endorsement in their area as well. And your second question was student ratios. We have an SOQ, Standards of Quality in Virginia, that identify ratios for in-person, and we align to those in the virtual program.
All right, I don't know what those are. Can you tell me what your numbers are?
Yeah, sure. 150 to 1 for regular classes, and then for elementary, roughly 24, 25 to 1, just depending on grade level.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
And likewise, our teachers the majority are from Florida, and we have several that are outside of the state that may have moved there, and we've allowed them to continue. And they also get certification in their state, because we do work with other states. And our ratio is equivalent of roughly 27 to 1. We usually talk about loads. Now, what's the maximum load? Because since they're not actually in classrooms, but it's about 27 to 1.
And that's K-12?
Yes. Yeah, we average 27 to 1.
Thank you. Lon?
Thanks. I apologize if this has been answered already, but I don't think it has. I was curious on the matter of equity. I represent the boards of education in this group, and one of the things I'm hearing from my members as part of CAVE is that online learning is a real opportunity to kind of address some of the equity issues we have here in the state. I'm looking at, and I don't mean to pick on you here, Florida, but I was just looking at the data panel that you put up for us. And in that, the full-time population of the online school, does not kind of align with Florida's racial breakdown as far as student populations are concerned. So, for example, you're at 10% higher on white students and actually 10% lower than the state average on Black students. And I would imagine that's countered by the programs you're running with districts across the state. I'm just curious, for both our guests on the call, how are you addressing the equity issues? Because I think there's a real opportunity, especially at the high school level, to connect students in districts that have challenge with resources to be able to provide the kinds of coursework that other parts of the state receive.
So I'm not sure if you looked at the multiracial amount.
Yeah, I'm looking at. Yeah, that looks like it's what, about 6.9%.
Right. So you kind of need to add that up because I'm not sure you're going to see a multiracial breakout of the state of Florida separately in terms of the population. So it's lower, but it's very similar. Once you count the Black students and multiracial and Hispanics, it comes out to about the same amount.
Yeah, looking on your statewide numbers, it's like 3.9% for 2 or more races. I mean, it's all, I think it's 6 of one, half dozen the other. I'm just curious, just, in general though, like how are we, what efforts are being done to across the board in both states about equity and trying to get students who don't have access to certain courses to get them.
Right. And one of the issues has been the broadband issue, which fortunately is being addressed nationally now. And because that has been, frankly, one of the challenges. And we're also looking into the micro school aspect because they're showing a whole lot of interest in that concept of having micro schools in areas, especially those areas that are underserved, in order to help better serve those populations. So we're investigating that currently.
And in Virginia, we do constant communication with all divisions. We're trying to engage every division, trying to talk about the benefits of virtual learning, what Virtual Virginia can potentially bring to classrooms in both supplemental and full-time environments. So, we recognize that, access and opportunity is an issue. And so we just want to make school divisions aware that, we are here. We are here to provide these services for you should you need them. And one example I can give you is world language instructors have been really difficult to staff. Many positions have been difficult to staff at the Commonwealth, I'll be honest, but world language in particular. And so we have become the world language provider in many courses for a division. They turn to us to provide that service. So, and we're happy to do it because we know that otherwise those services may not be provided, or they may have to go with some other vendor or provider in that space. We're happy to do it as their partner. So it's not just full-time learners. We talk about getting these courses or getting students access to these courses.
Yeah. Another thing that's important to know about Virginia is there is a mandate for in-person instruction in place for this year. And it allows for virtual options for students, but not every school division offers a virtual option. And they can choose to contract with a private provider in addition to Virtual Virginia. So they have multiple types of options. But right now, Brian, about how many of our school divisions utilize, do we have full-time students from?
Full-time. Yeah, full and part-time, it's 130 out of the 132.
Right.
So there's 2 that aren't currently using Virtual Virginia. but we have their attention. So, come talk to me in 2 weeks, and it may be that we may have on things too. But, but it really does speak to the trust we've developed with divisions to have that high of a number using your program. It really does bode well.
And some school divisions have their own online schools or programs that are available that they've developed.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Wow. We can keep going on and on with this conversation and gather so much information from all of you. Thank you so much.
No, we can't, because I've got family coming here in about 5 minutes. So y'all got to wrap it up in Connecticut.
Brian, I love it. Thank you so much.
They've already got me. I'm in the basement. I'm in the very back corner of my house that has not been invaded. So.
So we are incredibly grateful that you have taken the time to spend it with us this afternoon and extended that time. So thank you so much. So I'm going to actually give the floor to our chair and Commissioner of Education, Charlene Russell Tucker, so that she can close the meeting, and then to the members of the panel, thank you so much as well. And we will update the agenda because I'm being very conscious of the time, and we will definitely continue this conversation together. Commissioner?
Certainly, I just wanted to find out, and certainly to our guests, again, thank you for spending the time with us. As you can see, our participants here are eager to learn more, and don't be surprised if we come back at you with some additional questions. But again, thank you for being here. So I won't keep you beyond the time, but I'm looking at our colleagues here and whether we have any of our members who have any last thoughts or just wonderings or things you want for us to think about as we plan for the next meeting. Just wanted to make sure I threw that out as we had such rich conversation today. What is it that we still didn't hear or we still need to know as the work continues here?
Kathy?
I'd just like to say, I think we need to spend a little bit more time on how IEPs would be implemented and who would be the responsible parties for a state-run remote learning academy. As you know, Commissioner, local districts are suffering tremendously from staffing shortages. So putting this responsibility, a remote learning academy responsibility on a local district, however the student, if it was a parental choice to go into a remote learning academy, could become a very, very cumbersome issue at the local level. So I think that that's something that we need to really be cognizant of and thinking outside the box on and figuring out how we could do something like that along with related services.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Other thoughts as we plan for the next meeting or next meetings and as the work continues? All right. Well, you know exactly where to find us. But in our spirit of Thanksgiving, thank you for lending your time and expertise to this group. Critically important as we go forward. I will keep you posted if we get an invite, as Kathy mentioned, to the other event that's being planned, so we can learn there as well and be able to ask questions. So we'll continue with that. And I think with that, Ingrid, anything else, or Irene or Ajit, that we need to do, or are we set to adjourn today?
Just a reminder of our next meeting, if that's okay, will be December 13th. And just note the time change, it'll be from 1 o'clock to 2:30. So different from today. So December 13th from 1 p.m. to 2:30.
Perfect.
And a huge thank you to Louis, Sandra, Brian, and Michael for taking the time to come to us. Thank you so much.
All right. With that said, everyone, don't eat too much, but enjoy your time with family, friends. Hope you have a restorative time. Stay safe and be well. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.